Some mushrooms were never meant for common hands. They were reserved for the gods. That sounds like a line from an ancient myth, but it turns out it might be real. In this episode, Joe Rogan sits down with renowned mycologist and mushroom researcher Paul Stamets. Together, they explore the mind-bending world of psilocybin, fungi, and the hidden role mushrooms have played across time, from ancient temples to modern neuroscience. Here are 10 takeaways that will change the way you see mushrooms forever. Takeaway 1. This mushroom was once sacred to gods. Paul Stamets shares how psilocybin mushrooms were once seen as divine gifts, not drugs. In ancient Mesoamerican cultures, these mushrooms were called the flesh of the gods. Only priests, rulers, and spiritual leaders were allowed to eat them. They were not boiled or cooked because people believed that would hurt the spirit of the mushroom. Paul talks about a cross found in a 16th-century Mexican church with carved mushrooms at its center. These were not random decorations. They looked exactly like psilocybin species. In Egypt, mushrooms were linked to the goddess Hathor, who was also connected to cows. Psilocybin mushrooms grow on cow dung. Paintings from that time show mushrooms growing out of vases in religious scenes. Even some Christian art shows halos that look like the underside of mushroom caps. These are not just coincidences. These images point to a time when mushrooms were part of secret religious practices. For ancient people, these mushrooms were not drugs. They were holy tools. Takeaway 2. Faith leaders still use psychedelics today. While those ancient uses sound like distant history, Paul explains that modern religious leaders are now exploring psychedelics again. In a recent study, 24 clergy members from different religions took high doses of psilocybin under medical supervision. These included Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and Jews. Almost all of them said it was one of the most meaningful spiritual experiences of their lives. More importantly, it did not weaken their beliefs. Instead, it made their faith feel even deeper. One priest said it was like meeting God with the lights fully on. This shows that psilocybin can open spiritual doors, even for people who already live deeply religious lives. Instead of taking people away from their beliefs, it brings them closer. Takeaway 3. Psychedelics help us make peace with death. Paul talks about how psilocybin is now being used with people facing terminal illness. These are people who know they are dying and are often filled with fear or sadness. In Canada, a group of doctors and Indigenous elders guide these patients through psilocybin ceremonies. One powerful moment Paul shares is when the patients reached the peak of their journey, and the elders began a sacred drum circle. The sound of the drums during the trip brought comfort and meaning that words could never reach. After the session, many of these patients were able to accept their death and even became emotional support for their families. They told their loved ones that it would all be okay. Some patients who had been frozen in fear became peaceful and calm. This was not magic. It was psilocybin helping people come to terms with life and death. Takeaway 4. Mushrooms may have shaped human evolution. Joe and Paul dive into one of the most fascinating theories in psychedelic science. It is called the stoned ape theory. This idea, created by Terence and Dennis McKenna, suggests that early humans may have evolved faster because they ate psilocybin mushrooms. As the forests turned into grasslands, our ancestors followed grazing animals. Those animals left behind dung, and in that dung grew mushrooms. These mushrooms did more than feed them. Paul explains that modern science shows psilocybin helps the brain form new connections. It improves vision, enhances creativity, and opens up new ways of thinking. So it makes sense that humans who ate these mushrooms may have gained a major advantage. They could see better, think more clearly, and maybe even speak more creatively. That small shift could have changed the course of evolution. Takeaway 5. Mushrooms really do rewire the brain. The idea that psilocybin helps the brain grow is not just a theory. Paul talks about lab studies where human brain cells were exposed to psilocin, the active form of psilocybin. These cells started growing more connections and communicating better with each other. Psilocybin works by binding to serotonin receptors in the brain, but it also triggers something called neuroplasticity. That means it helps your brain form new paths and repair damaged ones. This is a big deal for people with depression, trauma, or memory loss. It means their brains can heal. Even people without major issues, what Paul calls the near normals, could benefit. As we age, our brains naturally lose some flexibility. Psilocybin could keep our minds sharp and flexible longer. We're halfway through the video. Thanks for sticking with us. If you're enjoying it, hit the thumbs up and share it in your WhatsApp groups. If you'd like to support us, please tap the thanks button below. It helps us keep making great content. Drop a comment and don't forget to hit subscribe for more. Now let's continue with the video. Takeaway 6. Mushroom hunting reconnects us with nature. One of the problems today, Paul says, is that people are too disconnected from nature. Kids spend more time staring at phones than walking in the woods. He explains a concept called nature deficit syndrome, where people actually suffer mentally from not being around plants, animals, and natural places. Mushroom hunting is one simple way to fix that. You go outside, breathe fresh air, and start noticing the small things. There is even an app called iNaturalist that lets you take photos of mushrooms and get help identifying them. This turns learning into a kind of treasure hunt. Paul says when people find a new mushroom, it feels like finding an old friend. He also points out that amateur mushroom hunters have helped discover new species just by using their phones. Going out into the wild to look for mushrooms is not just a hobby. It is a way to feel human again. Takeaway 7. Psilocybin could reduce crime and addiction. Paul shares a bold idea. If psilocybin was used more widely, society could see huge benefits. People with trauma, addiction, or even violent histories often carry deep emotional pain. Psilocybin helps them look inside and face that pain. It can create moments of self-forgiveness and clarity. Paul mentions that law enforcement officers and veterans are already seeing results. Some police have used it to cope with the stress of their jobs. Veterans with PTSD report major healing. If this became more common, Paul believes we could see less crime, less addiction, and fewer broken families. The cost of therapy might be high, but the savings on prisons and hospital visits would be far greater. In a world where punishment has failed, mushrooms might be a better solution. Takeaway 8. Mushrooms have always been used in secret. Even though psychedelics were made illegal in the 1970s, people never really stopped using them. They just went underground. Paul points out how religious symbols hid mushroom imagery in plain sight. He says the same thing is true for culture today. From secret spiritual retreats to underground therapy groups, psilocybin is still helping people, just behind closed doors. He also explains how many ancient spiritual leaders probably used psychedelics to connect with what they called the divine. Today, modern people are doing the same thing. The only difference is that now, science is starting to catch up to what the shamans already knew. The healing power of these mushrooms was never lost. It was just hidden. Takeaway 9. These mushrooms make us kinder humans. One of the less talked about effects of psilocybin is that it can make people more kind and empathetic. Paul calls this the power of random acts of kindness. He says most people are alive today because somewhere in their family tree, someone helped someone else. Maybe it was during a war, a famine, or a simple act like fixing a flat tire. Psilocybin helps people see beyond themselves. It lowers the ego and increases connection. People who take it often say they feel more love, more forgiveness, and more understanding. In a time when the world feels divided, this could be one of the most important tools we have. Takeaway 10. We might be running out of time. The podcast ends on a serious note. Paul believes that humanity is at a turning point. With threats like climate collapse, artificial intelligence, and mental illness rising, we need solutions that go deeper than technology or politics. He believes psilocybin can help guide people toward better choices, stronger communities, and deeper wisdom. Joe agrees, saying that psychedelics can help us rediscover our humanity. This is not about getting high. It is about waking up. If we can reconnect with nature, take care of each other, and keep our minds open, we might have a shot at making it through this next chapter of human history. So, If you thought mushrooms were just pizza toppings or things to avoid in the woods, think again. These fungi might be the key to healing our minds, fixing our communities, and even understanding our place in the universe. The question is, are we brave enough to listen to what they have to say? Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support this channel, hit the thanks button below. It really helps us keep going. If you enjoyed this summary, please leave a like and share it in your WhatsApp groups. To join discussion about this video, drop a comment below. And for more videos like this, hit the subscribe button below.